Why did Jesus say to Luisa Piccarreta that we do not understand the Immaculate Conception? We will look at our Blessed Mother as the new Eve as it relates to the Immaculate Conception. We will review what our Blessed Mother and Jesus tell Luisa about the Immaculate Conception. Then we will discuss the important implications that this has for the future of the Church and therefore the world. The idea of Mary as the new Eve originates within the ancient Church, with saints such as Saint Irenaeus in the 2nd century, stating that as through disobedience Eve created the knot of sin, through obedience Mary untied that knot. And Saint Jerome in the 4th century, saying that death came through Eve, but life has come through Mary. There again, the same analogy. In light of that history of Mary as the new Eve, St. Cardinal John Henry Newman posited that if Eve was born without sin, it stands to reason that our Blessed Mother as a new Eve was also born without the stain of original sin. And this is the Immaculate Conception. Now let us turn to what Jesus and Mary have to say to Luisa Piccarreta about the Immaculate Conception. The first passage is our Blessed Mother speaking to Luisa Piccarreta, and it's in the book The Virgin Mary in the Kingdom of the Divine Will. And if you've seen one of my other podcasts regarding Padre Pio, Padre Pio was looking forward to the writing of this book so he could read it. Also, this book comes with several imprimaturs from the Church. The first passage reads, "All of my sublime prerogatives, for which the Holy Church so much honors me, are nothing other than the effects of the divine will, which dominated me, reigned, and lived in me." And Jesus states about the Immaculate Conception in the Book of Heaven, a feast that more truly can be called the conception of the divine will in the sovereign Queen of Heaven. And this he told Luisa Piccarreta on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, December 8th, 1928. And let us see why Jesus and Mary are saying that. We'll look at the next slide and they will elaborate. And this is another statement of Jesus to Luisa: "And my Church, instead of honoring my divine will, primary cause and prime act, honored the effects of it and proclaimed her immaculate, conceived without sin. It can be said that the Church gave her human honors, not divine honors." And this is why Jesus is saying that. Our greatest prodigy was that in each one of her thoughts, words, breaths, heartbeats, movements, and steps, our will poured upon her. And she offered us the heroism of a divine and eternal thought, word, breath, heartbeat, operating in her, and raised her so high that what we were by nature, she was by grace. And again, he's referring to the union of Mary with the divine will. And just as living within the 4th degree of the divine will, sin does not exist, so it is that the existence of the divine will in Mary precludes the presence of sin in Mary during conception and during her life, which existed in union with the will of God. And it is in this union with the divine will of God that means that besides being conceived immaculate without original sin, that Mary's acts were performed with God's divine will and shared in the eternal omnipresence, the omnipresent nature of God through participation with God and grace. And as Jesus just said in the quote we've read, Mary does through grace what the divinity does by nature. So what are the implications for the future of the church and the world? The answer lies in the relationship between Mary and the church that's been taught by many theologians and doctors of the church. A prominent example is St. Ambrose, who taught that the Mother of God is a type or figure of the church. This is important in light of what Pope Benedict mentioned regarding the third secret of Fatima, that it refers to sin within the church. And whether you refer to it as sin or apostasy or both, the end will be the same. Just as Mary could not be conceived with the stain of original sin because she possessed the gift of the divine will, so will the church, as it conceives a divine will within it, also be purged of this sin or apostasy, because sin and the presence of the divine will are incompatible, mutually exclusive, and sin will lose that confrontation at every occurrence. Again, I thank you for joining us in this video, and there are other videos in the Elijah's Cloak YouTube channel. Just the last few are the fourth degree of the divine will, where we elaborate specifically on that degree, and one regarding the mystics of Carmel and the divine will. How many statements by these mystics, such as St. John of the Cross, St. Therese, St. Teresa of Avila, were references regarding how important it is to live in union with the will of God. Again, thank you for joining.